welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is our own pianist in residence, Sam Page. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. You may have noticed that I didn't do a show yesterday. I needed to beach it. I needed a beach day badly. So sorry, guys. No show yesterday because I had to go to the beach, and it was worth it. It was wonderful.
Ooh. Oh, yeah.
I was in the now every moment, and it was great. So that's why I'm now back to being my happy, smiley self again, which is a good thing because we have a happy, smiley guest with us today. Right, Sam?
Oh, yeah.
And I, once again, I keep forgetting. I try to make it a practice, Brenden, to always ask my guests, oh, how do you pronounce your last name? And I forgot to do that. So I'm going to take a wild stab and see if I can get it right. I want to welcome Brenden Kumarasamy.
That's it, actually.
Yes, got it in one. All right. I love it. Welcome to the show today. Brenden is a communication coach. Very interesting thing he's got going on. First of all, I love the quote that is on his profile. He says, I believe the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford a communication coach, so it's my duty to help her succeed with my free resources. What a great quote. I like that.
Thanks, really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. How did you know she was a 7-year-old? No, never mind. No, seriously. Tell us a little bit about how you got into this communication thing. Because I gather you just kind of fell into it more than anything else.
Yeah, it was entirely an accident. And great to be on, you two. Thanks so much for having me. Of course. So the story started when I was in college. I went to business school, and I did these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while the guys my age were playing rugby or basketball, I wasn't one of those guys. I did presentations competitively, and that's how I learned how to speak, Walt and Sam. And then as I got older, I started to coach a lot of the students, not really for money or anything. It's just mostly for free, just helping them about how to speak. And that's how I learned the skill of coaching, and then I leveraged that for the YouTube channel because I felt that no one was really sharing free content for the world, and it just turned into something I never thought it would.
And you have pretty much found that the information that you share, the concepts and the techniques that you teach are not really the same as what other communication coaches teach.
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about what you do actually teach.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go through some of those principles. I'm sure a lot of it's similar, but let's point out the key differences. The first one is a lot of the languaging around communication, Walt and Sam, is really negative. Like everyone always brings.
But that's true for most of the stuff that's out there in the world. So you're right on track. Yeah.
Fair enough. Right. Like, the fear, the only thing worse than fear is like death, and people would rather be in the casket than give the eulogy, to use a Seinfeld quote. And I look at all this garbage, and I do call it garbage in the industry, and I go, wait a second, what about how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? Like, why don't we get excited about her? So it's just a simple question. I created that. I don't know anyone who's invented that before me, so I thought
that's a fair question, too. Yeah. I mean, I think you could apply it to a lot of fields, but especially to the field of communication. Why not look at it in a way that's actually feeling good?
Absolutely. Because it should be. It's every moment of our life. It's the way we talk to our family. It's the way we order food at a restaurant. It's the way that we meet friends when we travel. It's every moment of our life. So that was just one of many reasons where I said, I felt I had something to share, so we made it work.
And it's a big deal, actually. I mean, one of the things that we talk about a lot, of course, one of the main topic behind the show is law of attraction. We don't spend the whole day on that, but it still is like it's the theme behind the theme, so to speak. And when you're talking about any kind of law of attraction work, you're also talking about working on yourself. And one of the key aspects of working on yourself is what they call self-talk. How do you talk to yourself? So communication is vital because the first person you need to talk to is you.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. And it's also the way that we communicate boundaries as well with the people around us.
Right.
There's a very big difference between, hey, I need some alone time versus I would like 45 minutes every morning to read a book because it calms my mind and helps me show up better for the people around me. Very big difference. It's just we usually speak like version 1. Hey, give me some alone time. Well, why? Well, I don't know. I just want it.
Well, nothing wrong with alone. I had alone time yesterday. Staring at the water was great. It was wonderful. I mean, there's a time and a place for everything, and that was it. But you're right. There's also a time and place for the other part too. because if you want to grow as a human being, well, guess what? You got to put some time in on yourself. Something we're not really used to. More and more people, I think, are getting into it now. More and more people are becoming aware of how important it is to do that kind of work on yourself. And that's a good thing. But now we need to have the communication skill to go along with that. So let's talk a little bit about that for a moment. When you think about self-communication, what do you think of?
Right. So when I think of self-communication, I go back to the definition of what communication is for me.
Okay.
For me, it's always achieving a specific outcome for a specific audience. But that could be very vast. That could be speaking on a stage all the way to convincing your significant other that you should have Mexican food tonight and not Chinese food. Right. So when I think of self-communication, it's always about asking yourselves, what are we trying to communicate to ourselves to achieve what result? And result doesn't necessarily mean like achieve like this grandiose thing. It could simply mean I want to feel a little bit better about myself. Okay, so how should I improve the way that I communicate with myself to achieve that feel good feeling so I can live a more fulfilling life or to my own standards?
And then, of course, once you master that, by the way, that takes a lifetime, but once you master that, then the second stage is you also want to be able to communicate with others. Yeah. And that's where you really, your forte really starts to come out at that point. So let's talk a little bit about that too.
For sure. So going back to the whole idea of how would your life change if you're an exceptional communicator, this is the answering that question gives us a very different sampling of why communication matters to us. Some people might say they want to be a better mother for their children. Other people will say, I want to improve the relationships of communication between the people that I love. Other people say, I want to get my next job promotion. I want to make more sales in my business. So when we have that burning desire, we get motivated to actually implement communication on a day-to-day basis, which brings me to the next piece. Communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, guys. One of those balls is body language. Another one is eye contact. Another one is vocal tone, variety, storytelling. The list goes on. So the next piece that we need to figure out is what are the 3 easiest balls to juggle first. And the first one of those balls, so I don't monologue too long here, is the random word exercise, where you pick a random word like fruit, like bowl, like phone, and you create random presentations out of thin air. And what this does is it helps you make sense out of nonsense, implying that you can make sense out of anything.
So it's a way of kind of talking your subconscious mind into believing you really can do this.
Absolutely. And that's how we get people to actually get the result. The question that we think about in transformation with communication anyways is what is the easiest result that will convince the person who's either listening to this podcast or in general to say, I actually can be better at this. Because most people think they can't do the exercise at all. Okay, just take mug and create a presentation. But once they actually get the result, I just simplify it and I ask them a different question, which is the same one, frankly. What else is possible with their communication skills until they answer anything?
Okay. Well, that gives us a good outline of the basics here. So let's dive into it a little bit. What does make good communication?
Right. So this is a difficult question to answer, Walt, in the sense that good communication and effective communication is a multitude of different things. It's how you listen to people. It's how you respond to people, the mirror, the energy. Like I was saying, it's like 18 balls at the same time. Mm-hmm. So the idea here, and this is the good news, is if you're able to do communication well in a certain area, you'll be able to apply it across a multitude of mediums. Example, if you smile more in your presentations, you'll smile naturally more when you're having coffee conversations, right? So Sam's doing a great job with this, with his facial expressions, right? So I'm sure that if he was just having dinner with somebody, he's probably smiling too. Or if he's giving a presentation, he's probably smiling too. But the opposite is also true. If you never smile, not in Sam's case, but just in general, you won't do it across every other medium. So for me, what that looks like, to not overcomplicate things, is start with the random word exercise. Do that a few times a day. Do that with your family. And that allows you to think on your feet. But that ability to think on your feet won't just apply in presentations. It'll apply all across the globe, like a domino. When one domino falls, all the other dominoes start to fall. And then there's the other 2 exercises I can talk about as well if you'd like.
Sam, when you think about what he just said, do you find it's true? Do you find that when you smile more often, you smile more often, so to speak?
I think so. I think it becomes sort of a habit, and also just it kind of raises the vibe of what you're doing, so it just comes more easily, and I think it makes communication flow more easily and naturally as well.
I've also found that for myself, the more that I smile, I find that people smile at me even when I'm not deliberately smiling, which is always a bit of a surprise.
It's true.
I've actually noticed that too now that you mention it.
Right? Yeah. Well, because your face is used to being in that position, so it just kind of naturally goes there. And people say, "Oh, they're smiling at me," even though I have no idea what you're going through, what you're thinking about. I have no idea, but okay, fine, I'll go with it.
Indeed.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
And on that note, like when people listen, usually you two are actually not making the mistake at all, but a lot of people do, which is when they're listening, they don't smile. So let's say you're talking and I do this. But I'm probably focused. I'm probably listening to what you're saying. But from your perspective, you're looking at my face and going, "Oh, Brenden doesn't care about what I'm saying," which is really, so it's these small nuances. We're just weird like that as human beings that we have to catch to make ourselves better.
Because we look for affect. That becomes part of that. You mentioned the body language. That's part of the body language. The body language is telling me they're interested. They're not interested. He likes me. He doesn't like me at all. I mean, that's really what we're picking up on, is those little tiny cues like that. So
Absolutely.
Learning how to put those cues out. First of all, if you're looking for a mate, there's a great idea for you. Second of all, if you're looking to improve your business, there's a great idea for you. Third of all, if you're trying to improve your communication skill, there's a great idea for you. Did I mention that? Yeah, it's a powerful thing, that smile thing. So yeah, good first point. I like that.
Good idea for any imaginable situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So what else you got for us?
Absolutely. So let's go to ball number 2. So
Okay.
ball number 2 is the question drill. We get asked questions all the time in our life, you two. In our podcasts, at work, on shows, at school, at work, and in our homes. And a lot of us are reactive to those questions. We wait for the questions to appear, and then we go, and then give an answer. When I started guesting on shows probably a few years ago, and I had no clue what I was doing, and I still do to some extent today. So somebody asked me this funny question. He said, "Where does the fear of communication come from?" I looked at the guy and I was like, "I don't know, Los Angeles? San Diego?" I was like, "You tell me." It's like, "I don't know." So I looked, right? So that's the thing. So I needed to be more proactive. So what did I do? Every day for 5 minutes, guys, I would answer one question about communication. But I did that every day for years actually. So because of that, you're able, if you do this for just 1 year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your business, about your expertise, about who you are. You'll be bulletproof.
Really good. Well, that's true of any skill for sure. I mean, I don't care what it is. I don't care how bad you are at doing it. I have a co-host named Cindy Chavez, former co-host actually. I'm hoping she comes back. But she used to talk about how, let's say you never knew how to draw. You're like the worst drawer in the world. But if you get a pad with 365 blank pages and try to draw something every single day without fail, no matter how bad it looks, never showing it to anybody, by the end of 365 days, you're going to learn how to draw, just because you committed to learning every single day. So that makes total sense. Keep communicating every day. You're going to get better at communication.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So that's ball number 2. Is there a third ball? I think you said 16 or something like that. I mean, it was a large number. 18.
I usually give 3 of them because it's easy for people to digest. But
yeah, can't do too many. That's true.
Yeah. So I'd say the third one is so simple nobody does it. Make a list of the 5 people you love the most in your life. Family, friends, colleagues, clients, and ask yourself a simple question. What was the last time I sent them? Not a 30-minute, not a 30-hour, but rather a 30-second video message just to say how much you appreciate having them in your life. That's it.
Powerful.
Right? And you don't need to be great at communication either. And what's great about these video messages is it teaches a very powerful lesson, which is what is communication for? A lot of us think communication is a chore because we grew up believing it's one, like doing the dishes. Why? Because every presentation we gave in high school and elementary school were mandatory. We don't wake up one morning and say, "Hey, Walt, Sam, you want to give presentations all day and have breakfast?" Yeah, Sam's like the only person in America who's excited about that. All right, so there's that. They're always different, right? It's never, "Hey, let's talk about what you're excited about, like the law of attraction." No, you got to talk about like Shakespearean poetry.
Mm.
And then you got to talk about the Renaissance. And then the third piece is all those presentations are tied to a bloody punishment. So if you don't do a great job, you lose 25% of your grade. So yeah, this helps us recommunicate why speaking allows us to really make a difference in the world and help people out.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Well, it also does a second thing. I love the exercise. I love this exercise of basically putting out there to the world, to people that you care about, the fact that you care about them. And the reason I love it is because it not only does it help you with your communication skills, it helps to rewire your brain. It rewires your brain to start thinking about things and people and events and experiences differently. Especially, we mentioned earlier all the negative influences that are out there. If you've been giving a lot of attention to the negative influences, they're probably dominating your mind right now and on an ongoing basis. But you start doing these rewiring exercises, such as an appreciation exercise like that, and you just start thinking about things differently. You start thinking about different things. Your mind just starts focusing on different things. And, oh, by the way, your communication skills improve too. I mean, that's a good combination right there.
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
I love that. Okay. Well, I can't let it go at that one because that was so good. Do you have a fourth one? I mean, that's just really, that was good. I like that one a lot.
I'm glad you're enjoying it. So here's the fourth one. And it's not a tactic, it's a mindset.
Okay.
Right? And what I mean by that is for people who are listening to this podcast right now, they're probably thinking the following. Wow, this Brenden guy, he's showing all of these great tricks and tips. He's teaching us the random word exercise, the question drill. It only takes 5 minutes a day to do this. And then he teaches us the video messages. Wow, only 20 seconds. Except one problem, guys. The problem is people like to take notes, but they don't like to take action.
Oh,
So
yes.
if you want a fourth ball, here it is. So be sure you catch it as I throw it at you. The ball is the best way to speak is to speak. You can hear us all day talk, but you actually got to implement this. So if you leave this podcast with only one takeaway, it is the following. Book 15 minutes in your calendar tomorrow. Not next week, not next year, tomorrow. To do the random word exercise for 5 minutes. To do the question drill once for 5 minutes. And to send 5 video messages in 5 minutes. That's it. And if you do that every day for a month, you won't even recognize yourself anymore as a communicator. Except the problem is, most people don't want to do any of those 3 things, and that's why they stay where they are.
I think that probably holds true for almost any new skill that you could possibly want to acquire.
True.
I mean, we are default people. We live by default. We think by default. You know, we do yesterday the same thing that we're doing tomorrow, and we do tomorrow the same thing we did yesterday. It's just, we just do that. We're very habitual, and it takes a lot to actually change a habit. I think to answer the question that you had trouble answering, you said, well, I don't know, Los Angeles. I think the ultimate answer to that question is how badly do they want to change? And it usually comes down to how much pain are they in? That's what I found. The people who are in the most pain are the ones most willing to make some kind of a change. The ones who are feeling comfortable, why would they bother? What's the point? If you're feeling okay, yeah, who cares about this communication crap? You know, I'm doing all right. No big deal. But if you're struggling with something, if you're suffering with something, that's when you're going to be more interested in doing it. And that's probably the hardest thing in life, in my opinion, is facing up to the fact that when you're not feeling good, you got to change something.
Absolutely. And that's why, you know, if you want to change the habit, not just in communication, but just in general, the most important piece is your identity. And changing that first, who you're being, how you're showing up in the world. That's why, kind of switching topics a little bit here. That's why my advice is always, to Tony Robbins' quote, and then I'll tweak it a little bit. He says the quality of your life is solely determined by the quality of the question that you ask yourself about life. My version of this is a lot more intense, which is I dare you to ask yourself a hard question about life every day for a month. Because if you do that, you'll never be the same ever again. And that's really the key, right?
Yeah.
Right? And I call them 80-20 questions. So we talk about, question like the 80-20 principle, which is what are the 20% of the actions that lead to 80% of the results. So my version of this is what are the 20% of the questions that lead to 80% of one's clarity in life.
Mm-hmm.
right? So one of those questions that I like to ask people is, if I gave you all the money in the world, I made you an instant billionaire, what would you do with the rest of your time? And this messes people up, you two. And the reason it messes people up and why they always answer travel and they just kind of short circuit is because we're all optimizing for a magical number that somebody else gave us, which is 65. You just gotta retire for 65. And then you realize Kobe died at 42 and Steve Jobs had all the money in the world and he died in his 50s. He had all the best doctors. So when you really start asking questions like that, then you re-optimize your time. And to your point, Walt, you start to create pain that creates urgency. You realize you actually don't have a lot of time. Your time is actually ticking like a time bomb. And when you get to that place in your life, then you say, okay, I need to change my identity. That's why I always like to say I have the wisdom of someone who's already dead.
I get it. In fact, I can tell you in direct response to what you just said, I am 65, and I can tell you, having achieved this age, sorry, the answer isn't here.
Uh-oh.
You don't get the answer by being 65. It doesn't work that way.
Whoa, that was the first time I said that, and somebody in front of me is like 65. That's so funny.
Well, that's law of attraction. But I love the concept. And I love what you're teaching there, because it's absolutely dead on. I think probably the biggest challenge in many people's minds, I don't know if it's actually true in reality, but in many people's minds, I think the biggest challenge with communication is fear. Fear that if you communicate, you're going to in some way be belittled, or you're going to fail, or you're going to look bad, or especially if you're speaking in front of a group, oh my God, God only knows what's going to happen there. I'll probably be naked like in the nightmare. I mean, all these little things going through your mind, they're just driving you away from possibly being a communicator. I used to actually think that it was true, that fear was the main thing where communication was concerned. I'm beginning to think that's not so much true. I'm beginning to think it's more along the lines of we talk ourselves into being afraid. It isn't the fear, it's the talking ourselves into it. I'm curious to know what your take is on that.
Wonderful question, Walt. And I'm the right communication coach to have on the show right now, because anyone else to your response probably would have said, oh yeah, I think it's fear. I actually never thought it was fear either, and I'm very controversial with that in my industry. And the reason is for a few things. Number one, I think motivation is a greater challenge than fear. Because at the end of the day, if we're not motivated to work on our communications, because we ain't pushing through nothing. Whereas me, I have a crooked left arm. I studied my whole life in a language I didn't understand, which is French, because I'm born and raised in Montreal, which is where I live. And I have a bachelor's degree in accounting, and I started coaching CEOs when I was 22. Who in the world am I?
Wow.
Who in the world am I to start Master Talk? Like, that makes no sense. Like, it literally makes no sense. So why did I do it? And you said it so well in the opening. I did it for the 15, the 7, the 10-year-old girl who I think is the next Elon Musk, who can't afford a communication coach. So I never did it for my executives. I did it for the person that I felt couldn't be served without me, because I felt their pain, and I said, let me push through it. And the second piece, there's 3 parts to this. The second part is the fear will always exist, even for me. Let's say we're having lunch in Columbus. For some reason, you come out to Columbus, Walt. We're all having lunch.
And Sam's doing a dance at that one, by the way.
Yeah, I saw the tip. Right? So let's say we're all having lunch, and Elon Musk calls me, and he said, hey, buddy, really like your YouTube videos, good stuff. Saw you on the Walt show and Sam show. Can you coach me tomorrow? I'll pay you $1 million. Would I shit my pants? Yeah, I would shit my pants. Like,
Fair.
What? Just because I'm a coach, I just dissipated the fear? No, there's always a level. You can't remove it. So that's why I disagree that fear is the biggest challenge. And the third piece about talking yourselves into it, well, you're absolutely right. And more specifically, I would argue that the education system is the reason why all of us are born to be scared of communication. Because every memory we have of our childhood around communication is negative. Like when you think back to high school and your high school presentations, do you go, wow, these moments were so nostalgic. Wow, it's so amazing. No, you're like, we're all peeing our pants. Like, never want to do this again.
Oh yeah, it's more like something to survive, if anything.
That's exactly the word that I use all the time. And that's why we grew up that way.
Oh yes, great times.
You were just hitting upon one of my favorite topics to discuss, the various ways that the educational system absolutely messes us up. It's really true. It's just, I mean, there are a lot of people who dedicate a lot of time, who dedicate their lives, their careers to helping in this way. And I don't mean to demean any of them. I'm just saying the system itself needs some work. It needs a lot of work. Yeah, we could be doing people a whole lot better favor than what we do right now. But that's another topic. Let's go back to this topic because I think you're hitting on something important here. The fact that we are taught so many different ways to be afraid when we're in school, and not just in school. By the way, we're taught fear pretty much from the moment we're born. We have loving parents in many cases. Hope, some of us don't, but among those of us who do have loving parents and loving families and so forth, we grow up feeling loved. But even there, the negativity starts kicking in pretty early. It happens in the family. It happens in the schools. It happens in the community. It happens in the world of entertainment on the internet. It happens everywhere. We're experiencing it all over the place. And so it really isn't much of a surprise that we have so many people with such negative orientations. I find even now, I've been working on myself for the last 10 years. I still find myself kicking over to that side just because there's such a heavy inundation of it. And yet there's also the other piece of me that says, well, it can be unlearned. It can be, you can relearn it the other way, which is kind of what your exercises are all about. Do the exercises that you were describing, 15 minutes a day for 30 days, change your life. And I believe that would change your life, by the way. So there is at least hope for change in that way. But for somebody who's actually, we have an audience here of people who do a lot of work on themselves. They're advanced where law of attraction is concerned. They're very knowledgeable about spiritual stuff and so forth. So they've done a lot of this kind of work on themselves. And yet I think if you talk to any of them, you will find that there's always some area of their life that, boy, I just can't seem to get past certain places that I'm at, certain blocks, whatever. And there's always that negative messaging that goes on in the background. So I'm thinking about them right now when I ask, we've talked a lot about communication skills. We talked earlier about the importance of communicating with yourself and how you carry on that communication. What kind of communication guidance or lesson can you give to somebody who's doing the work on themselves and finds certain areas that they're just having trouble breaking through?
Right. I mean, this is the same question I work on myself because obviously I'm nowhere near perfect. There's a lot of things that I
Welcome
work
to
on.
the club.
Right. It's just I don't struggle too much with communication anymore anyways. Though there's always room for improvement. So here's what I would say. That for people who are more advanced, I always start the conversation like this. Really spend some time reflecting on the successful human being that you already are. Because a lot of people don't do that nearly enough. And I didn't until a coach told me to do it, frankly. Right. It's one of my big L's in life which is weird for a young guy to say, but it's something I need to be proactive about, is you got to celebrate the W's. Mm-hmm. Because W's create, and W just means win for people who are listening. As you accumulate more wins in your life, it naturally builds up your confidence until you believe that you can accomplish a lot more than you thought. I mean, when I was 19, I thought my idea of the dream was to get a job in corporate America, which really did change my life in many mm-hmm. ways, financially. But I never thought I could be like this communication coach and impact all these people and come on a podcast and share a message. That was never a part of the game. So if you told me at 19, not only was I going to get the corporate job, but I was going to quit it too, to start a YouTube channel. I'd been like, there's something wrong with this person.
The wiring isn't quite right here, folks. Please check it. Thank you.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of like this natural expansion where I always believe with personal growth, and this is not coming from me, it's coming from the mentors who teach me this, because a lot of my thought leadership is really centered around communication, is this idea that when you take 2 steps forward, you need to remember to take a step back. Right? So keep taking 2 and then 1 and then 2 and then 1 so that what you believe is expansive will continue to expand. So that's why when we do, like, for example, I'm sure an exercise you guys have taught a lot on this podcast, the Wheel of Life, and you go through, every area of your life, health, spirituality, impact, before you get to the 3s out of 10 and the 2s out of 10, which for me, by the way, is dating, it's romantic relationships, right? Which is still like a 5 for me. Before we get to that 5, let's focus on the 10s. Let's celebrate that and then ask ourselves the next question, which is what made us successful in those areas? and document that. Okay, well, I got a 10 in mission because I took the time to ask myself the difficult questions. I without all the rejection, I still went through it. And then the third part of that, which is something I'm still working through, but we're all works in progress. That's fine. The awareness is the most important part. Is now how can we apply those lessons in the area in which we need the most work in?
I love that. That's great. Okay. So now I'm going to do a little deep digging here, because we've gotten a very good feel of what it is that you teach. And by the way, you teach some fabulous stuff. I totally endorse what you're teaching here.
Thank you, brother. Really appreciate it.
Oh, definitely. I love what you're doing. But as you mentioned, Tony Robbins, and you mentioned other mentors and so forth. And as you know, mentors, one of the best things that mentors do is they tell us stories that illustrate their experiences. So I'm going to put you on the spot here as the communication expert on the show today. Tell us a story that kind of lays out how your own particular journey led you to some of these conclusions.
Sure, I'll give you one. It's funny because the second you said Tony Robbins, I thought about the salad bar story.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So I'll tell you one. I was watching a TikTok the other day, and the TikTok was about Taylor Swift.
Okay.
So Taylor Swift walks up on the stage, and she's winning an award, and it's 2014. And the award is called Woman of the Year for the most change maker or woman in music. And of course, she's amazing. So she stands up on that stage and she says, "Your future Woman of the Year is 11 years old right now."
Nice.
Right. She's in a choir. She's learning how to sing, and we need to take care of her. Then she walks off the stage.
Wow.
And then, don't worry, the story's not over. Walt's already.
That was good enough by there. I was impressed right there. Wow.
He's already sold. Then it's 7 years later. Okay. 7 years later. And Billie Eilish becomes the youngest inductee in Billboard history to a Woman of the Year, and she's 17. So she gets up on that stage. She's got her big bulky jacket, her big glasses. She looks at the crowd and goes, "What's up, guys? So great to be here. I have no idea how I won this award, but I'm here and I want to thank everybody." And then the last 10 seconds of her TikTok changed my life, because she looks at the audience and she says, "Yeah, in 2014, I was watching Taylor Swift win this award, and I was 11 years old." And I was learning choir, and I was learning how to sing, and you all took care of me. So thank you for doing this, and thank you, Billboard. And she walks off the stage. Wow. And after I listened to that, the reason it moved me so much is because I thought about the next Elon Musk. You know, when Elon Musk was 15 years old and he was some kid in South Africa, nobody gave a shit about him. Nobody believed in him. Nobody sat him down for 45 minutes and said, "Hey, kid, you should learn how to speak. Let me just coach you. I could coach that guy today in 45 minutes and get him a result." And nobody helped him. So I thought about the next Elon Musk, because he won regardless. He just would have had an easier time with communication. So what about the next Elon? And when I had that realization, I had a big epiphany in my life, because I realized in that moment I was the only human being on earth who actually gave a shit about the next Elon Musk from a communication perspective. And I realized also that I was the only person that could democratize the world's information and relate to the 15-year-old, because I'm currently 26, but I look like a 15-year-old kid. And that's when I realized what my mission was, which is to empower every genius of our society to become exceptional speakers in the same way Dale Carnegie couldn't do it when he was alive. So if I could do that, I could be the greatest communication coach that ever lived and help people long after I'm dead. And that's the mission.
Wow. Emulating Dale Carnegie, I give you a lot of credit. That's a high standard to try to reach for, and you're going for it. So yeah, kudos to you for that, because that's a big deal right there in my mind. I love also the fact that you pick Elon Musk for your story, for the subject of your story. Not the least of which because of what some of his motivations were growing up in South Africa. He was very much a fan of science fiction literature.
Yeah, Isaac Asimov.
Right. Asimov, and not just Asimov, a whole bunch of them actually. And so much of what he does now, particularly with the SpaceX program, but also with the Tesla program, so much of what he does comes out of what he learned in science fiction. So what was ultimately happening is that Asimov and the other science fiction writers that he read were influencing him to become the person that he was today, that he has become today. In other words, they were communicating to him. And I mentioned this because communication isn't just in spoken word. It's also in written word. It's in visual. It's in body language. It's in so many different forms. And so I'd like you to kind of talk a little bit about the various ways that we communicate, not just verbally, but in many different ways, because I think all those communication skills really matter.
Absolutely, Walt. So here's what I would say. I would say to both of your points, communication can be distributed across a multitude of mediums. Podcast hosting is very different than podcast guesting, which is also very different than podcast listening, right? So there's different mediums. So here's what I would say. I would say there's kind of two parts to this question. The first part of the answer is to pick the medium where you distribute content that you're the most comfortable in, that you can triple down on. And that could be verbal, that could be written, that could be audio format, figure out what you're passionate about and distribute in that way. It could be through video. But the other part of the conversation that I feel is not talked enough about in personal development, because it's too surface level. They just said read books. I disagree with that as well. I think it's more about when you distribute internally, when you take in information, take the source or pick the medium of communication that is the most efficient and that is the most exciting for you. So for me personally, I don't read a lot of books. A lot of people think I read a lot of books. I don't, actually, very little. But I listen to a crap ton of podcasts, right? 10 hours a week. That's my routine. And I love doing that in the morning. So I've been able to listen to hundreds of these episodes, and that's how I got my personal growth shtick. Whereas other people, they've read hundreds and hundreds of books. But I think the key is really pick the medium of learning that you can be the most sustainable on. And I feel that nuance isn't discussed enough about just in general.
I love that. That's great. In fact, you were just kind of cueing in my mind where I've done most of my learning. I have a fair amount of book learning, but honestly, I don't get that much from books. I've gotten much more from doing a podcast where I talk to experts. That's how I got this podcast started in the first place. Listeners know that story, so I won't do the whole story, but in a nutshell, the 2008 financial crisis wiped my business out, wiped my wife's business out. We went deep in debt. By 2012, I was, basically trying to survive, deep in debt, and not really sure how to do it, and couldn't even afford to hire a coach. I couldn't even afford to buy a self-help book. I was really, really bad. So I started a podcast figuring, well, I could do that for free and I could get experts on. They could teach me stuff. And that way I could get better, And it worked. It was a great plan. It worked out beautifully. But it also illustrates that even if you're not a great communicator, you can talk to other people who are good communicators, and you can learn from them along the way a bunch of stuff, including, by the way, how to communicate.
Wait, you've been running a daily show for 10 years now?
10 years. Yeah, it'll be 10 years next month.
My God, congratulations.
Thank you. It was only weekly for the first 3 or 4 years, but then I couldn't do it. Weekly wasn't enough. I was addicted.
Still, I mean, you started earlier than some of the big names in podcasting. So I guess you're clearly one of them, Walt. So congrats.
I guess. I don't know. I mean, I just do it because I love it. I mean, what other reason is there to do something, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah. But that communication is, I guess my point there that I was trying to make, communication isn't just about you speaking to somebody else. It's about you listening to someone else. Communication is a two-way street. We kind of forget that. We kind of tend to treat communication, especially in the age of Twitter, it's all about putting the message out. There's a lot less emphasis today on taking the message in, but without taking the message in, there's no communication. It's like the yin and yang. You can't have the one without the other. So to me, the two kind of go hand in hand. I kind of think that the one side kind of gets left behind. And I think that listening is one of the most valuable skills we have. It's a basic part of communication. In fact, if you don't have listening skills, you're missing out. You're missing out on a lot. Oh, by the way, it also makes you a better communicator because the more that you listen, the more you have to say. Right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Walt. I completely agree. I think the only missing piece there with listening that, once again, I feel isn't discussed enough is how do people effectively practice this on a consistent basis?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because the problem with listening in general as a way to get better at it, because I struggled with it for a long time and I still do, by the way. And the reason is because when you're listening to somebody, half your brain is listening to it and the other half is going, how do I sound smart when it's my turn to talk? So it's tough to actually figure this out. So there's actually a couple of practical ways that I have to actually get better at this. So let's start with the most important one, which is the percentage of questions versus statements that we communicate on a day-to-day basis. A lot of us, when we communicate, Sam and Wald, it's always statement, 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 statement. I believe this. Well, I believe this. Well, I think that. And I think that's a ping-ponging of constant statements. Whereas what I find the top communicators and listeners on the planet do is when somebody says, I believe this, they respond with, why do you believe that?
A question.
Why is that important to you?
Yeah.
What is it about that you find fascinating? And a lot of us, when we seriously audit the number of questions versus statements that we say on a day-to-day, the number is either 0, 1, or 2. So you want to keep increasing that number over time, and you'll automatically get better at listening. The more you listen to the world, the more the world will listen back to you, right? That's the principle. But then the other piece to listening is what's another way that you can do this, and which is fun. And I recommend this, and once again, I'm shocked that nobody teaches this. It's just pick 3 people around you. You don't need a coach for this, just people around you. And just have a 60-minute call with each of your top 3 people. They could be anybody. And just ask them what their top 3 goals for the year are and why those top 3 goals are important to them. And just ask them clarification questions around their goals and don't give them any advice for 45 minutes. That's it. If you just do that, you'll be an exceptional listener. You don't need to be a coach to do this.
You just gave a course in about 1 minute as to how to become a podcaster. Right. That's really that's it right there. You just nailed it. That's the whole job.
Love that.
I love that. Well, it's a funny thing that we don't ask as many questions, because I think you're right. I think people don't really ask a lot of questions every day. And the reason I say it's funny is it's actually the most powerful thing we can say. I mean, we are hardwired as human beings to answer a question. You want to test it? Ask a really random question of anybody and watch how they struggle to either avoid answering it or to find a way to answer it. But I guarantee it'll be a struggle because every ounce of their being is saying, I got to come up with an answer for this thing. Right?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
You know? That's why the great speakers really know the importance of asking a question, because they know that's how you engage an audience.
Right. That's why, my beginning statement of this podcast was a question, right? How would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? The reason is because questions are expansive. When we give answers, there's no room for interpretation. Versus when you say, what do you think of this? Or especially open-ended questions, it helps people really expand their minds into possibility. And I think a big reason why we don't step into possibility, especially when we're not really involved in the personal development space like I was 10 years ago. I had no idea what a Tony Robbins was or all this stuff. Well, what this does is when you start going like, okay, I got this job. What else could I do with my life? Just a simple question. It's like, and then you start to expand more into who you can be in the future.
It really is an amazing topic, communication, because there is so much to be learned and explored and applied in this topic. It just goes on and on and on and on. I love some of the things we've been talking about here because I think we've really hit on some of the most important points. I love, for instance, talking about the importance of not just communicating outward, but also taking communication in. I'm glad I thought to bring that out earlier. And I think you actually kind of cued me in the way you gave one of your little pieces there. You start hitting on the listening part. I said, oh yeah, that's a big part. Why aren't we talking about that one more? So that was great bringing that out. I love that we're talking about the fact that you can look at communication positively. I mean, that alone is huge because there are so few things in life that we don't look at things positively that, it's just it's almost out of the realm of habit. We don't have that as part of our regular lifestyle. So to actually be looking at something that people often associate with fear from a positive viewpoint, wow, I'm loving that a lot. So I mean, you're still young. You're 26. So you're going to be doing this for quite some time, I'm sure. I will not be surprised at all to say, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 years down the line, see that Brenden has become the new leading communicator in the communications industry. Because on the one hand, you're breaking ground. On the other hand, you're breaking ground in a way that goes way beyond communication. It goes into how you live your life. And I'm loving that tremendously. So thank you for that. Thank you for what you're doing. This is important stuff.
Thank you, man. That was one of the most powerful acknowledgments I've ever gotten in my life, and I really appreciate that. You're absolutely right. That's definitely the goal, and I appreciate it, man. It's very kind.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I mean, put it this way: like, if you imagine yourself, I know this is always hard to do. It's hard when you're being put on the spot, but that's the power of a question. So I'm going to ask it anyway. If you imagine yourself 5-10 years down the line, where do you imagine yourself being in the communication field?
I ask myself this question a lot.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, and I don't have a perfect answer because, and that's what I tell people.
It changes. It's going to change every day.
Exactly. And I want this to be a lesson for people who are listening is even the people you might admire in your life, they don't have all the answers. It's just the way that they communicate. It feels like they do. But when they're in private circles and they're talking to their coaches, they're going like, well, shit, I know the next 7 steps, but what's 8, 9, or 10? So it's okay. I mean, I started mastering my mother's basement, guys, where I literally still live, by the way. I'm still in my mom's basement, right? Just not for financial reasons. It's more just to live with my mom and spend time with her, which is a whole other topic. But I think the key is
good topic of communication, by the way. We'll leave it, but I'm just saying that's a great.
No, we can talk about it if you want, but yeah, that's. but I think the idea is I didn't think Master Talk would be what it is today. Sometimes I pinch myself like shit. I do this full time now, and I make more money than I did in my corporate job that like paid me really good money, like 6-figure salary. This is not like an entry-level position. So I never thought I would be where I am today in my life. But now I've really given myself the opportunity to expand my vision even further. So to answer your question, Walt, my ultimate goal in the next 10 years, and I'm not ready for it yet, but definitely in my 30s, I believe I will be. I want to write the best book in human history on communication.
Ooh.
Right? That's my North Star.
Do you have any sense of what that would look like?
I do, but I don't feel I'm ready yet.
Okay.
I still have a lot more Elon Musk to coach. I've coached a few of them, but I still haven't gotten enough people where I'm like I have a strong grip on it. I'm good.
All right. So I'm going to ask the tough interview question, right? Because you're interviewing for the job, right? They always ask you that real tough question. So the tough question is, okay, so what are your weaknesses? What do you have to work on?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a lot of them. I would say the biggest one is I still have immaturity as a kid, right? Because I'm still 26. So even if I've coached some really, really impressive people that I'm not allowed to talk about, and I've gotten them crazy results and things have been great, I don't have weaknesses in my coaching. I think it's more, I feel I need to go into more of a spiritual journey in my life to figure out some answers to those questions that I don't have yet about life. And that's what my coaches helped me through. So spirituality, I think, is a big miss. Romantic relationships is also something I need to master, especially when I get married someday in my 30s. I obviously want kids, and I think that's a major part of communication, but I haven't lived it. I have a lot of the principles, and I do it fine with my mom and my sister and my close friends. I haven't argued with my mom in over a decade, but I haven't done it with an intimate romantic partner. So I think that's a missing piece to the book that I don't have yet. I'm not ready for. Right? To teach anyway. So spirituality, romantic relationships. What other weaknesses do I have? I don't keynote enough either. So anyways,
that's good. No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were done. Then, he's going to bring out another one. All right.
Right. And that also is a principle. I think the best in the world always believes that they're not the best in the world. Right. Yeah. Is because all the things that I'm pointing out, to people who are listening, it requires an incredible amount of self-awareness. But when you get to that point in your life, that means you're batting way above. I mean, let's put my life into context, guys. It's ridiculous the life I have is 26. Like, I can't even, sometimes I look at my life and I'm like, shit, how did I figure all this shit out? So
if you had to give a course in it, how would you be able to teach the course? How do you become like me at 26? I don't know. You do what I did, I guess. I don't know.
Right. So I think the bottom line is definitely writing the best book in human history is one of my goals. The second one is, being very financially wealthy so I can start distributing that capital and make Master Talk even more expansive. Cause that's what I'm lucky is a lot of my passion is a very profitable gift, which is great for me, which means I can easily, expand what I do. And that's what's happening now in the recent years. And then the third piece is, starting a family. That's the other piece as well. That's a priority for me. Not now, but probably in like 10, 15 years since you asked me in 10 years. So that's the top 3.
That's beautiful. I love that. I want to follow up on a couple of those a little bit. You mentioned, for instance, romantic relationships. One of the things that I have found to be true, I know it was true in my own case. I didn't marry until I was 42.
Interesting.
I actually had 20 of the worst years of my life as a dating person in my 20s, 30s, and early 40s. It was awful. I'll put it this way. During that entire 20-year period, my longest relationship was 2 weeks.
Wow.
It was miserable, absolutely miserable. And one of the things that I learned out of it
is don't date in Connecticut.
Well,
I had to.
No, actually, it wasn't Connecticut.
Open. I had to take it.
It wasn't Connecticut. Wasn't the issue? No, the issue was me. The issue was me.
No,
I was self-sabotaging.
Of course not.
Oh, yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. I was self-sabotaging. I literally, this is not kidding at all. I didn't realize I was doing this at the time. It was going on more subconsciously, but I had a self-talk going on that basically said anytime I met a new woman, or even before I met her, somebody I saw across the room, I was instantly convinced she would never want to be with me.
Mm.
From the moment I made contact with her, any kind, I was convinced that she wouldn't want to be. And because I never actually faced what I was telling myself, I basically made it true over and over and over again. So all this is my long-winded way of coming back to what I think is the most important thing where romantic relationships are concerned, where business relationships are concerned, where any kind of communication is concerned, and that is confidence, believing in yourself. Because I didn't believe myself. As a romantic partner, if I had believed in myself, would I have said, well, she's not going to want to be with you? No, of course not. I would have said, I'm the right guy for her. Or I'm a good candidate or something better than she would not want to be with me. I mean, that was like the lowest rung of the ladder, right? So clearly I did not have good communication skills with myself. And the funny thing is, Brenden, if you had asked me during that time period, I would have said, yeah, my relationship with myself is good. I really would have believed that. I would have answered, but it would not have been true. This is, to me, this is the cornerstone for not just communication, but for anything relating to anything. And by relating to, I mean not just interpersonal relationships, because we have relationships with everything. We have relationships with people. We have relationships with jobs. We have relationships with computers and devices. We have relationships with things of all different, shapes, styles, colors, sizes. We have relationships all over the place, but all of relationships, single one of them is completely dependent upon how we feel about ourselves. Because if we don't feel good about ourselves, guess how that relationship, whichever one it is, guess how it's going to work out. You only get one guess, sorry.
They're going to fail, probably.
You're going to fail. It's not going to work out the way you wanted it to. It is a guarantee. Absolute guarantee. So this kind of is a very, very long-winded way of leading to my last question to you, second to last question, actually, which is, how do you improve your relationship with yourself in your communication?
It's tough, man. I would say for me, I believe it's really standing for something. I feel most of us, what we lack, and this is not true with just our generation, the one I'm in, but just all generations, is we don't stand for anything. We don't have a belief system of what we actually want to achieve in life, but more importantly, how we want to stand, what is important to us, what is not important to us. And the way that we improve the communication we have with ourselves is by improving the quality of the questions that we ask ourselves and the frequency of those questions. So, for example, I'm the product of thousands of questions that I've asked myself. Because what questions allow us to do is it creates clarity and self-awareness. And once we have more clarity and self-awareness, it improves the way we're able to communicate who we are better to the world and also to ourselves. But it starts with those questions, in my opinion, is once we start asking, and we won't know the answer. It's a messy process. But when we start to do that and also rely on how other people answer that same question, it gives us ideas on how to make ourselves better and also make conscious decisions of how we want to show up in the world. And I feel another piece to this, which I think is the final piece, is making a decision to make mini decisions that stack up over time. So, for example, one of them that I made in my early 20s was I was never going to move out of my mother's house for a long time. And the reason is super simple. I wanted the extra cash flow at the beginning, but it was also a lot of my friends, their moms died in their 20s. And I was like, shit, well, my mom's not ill or anything.
Mm.
She's fine. But I was like, okay, but for how long? Cause my dad died in 2019. So I made a conscious decision to say, okay, let me just spend more time with my mom. And then, but that's just one example, but I kept making other situations like that. Okay, spend more time on Master Talk. Spend less time on stupid TVs and expensive cars. How about I spend money on video production and improve the quality of what I put out in the world? And these micro decisions that we make for ourselves helps create confidence in our action and our ability to take action. But then the other piece is it improves our self-communication because we actually figure out what we want in the world and what we actually stand for. So that gives you kind of a mini version of what this is. But obviously we all know it's a long and arduous process.
Well, those are good. That's a good list of 3 there. I like those. Let me add a 4th one for you to consider. I think probably the most important thing that we can do as human beings is to appreciate ourselves. It's not something that we're normally taught to do. In fact, we're usually taught not to because, then you become an egotist or whatever, and you don't want to be that. Everybody knows that. Nobody seems to know why, but everybody knows it. But nevertheless, I really do think it's important to learn to love yourself. That's ultimately how I broke through on romantic relationships. I learned to love myself. The way I did it was kind of backward. I actually had to give up on relationships. That was the only way I could do it because I had so much negative baggage attached to it. I just had to say, okay, I quit. I'm done. And then a month later, I met my wife. It's just the way that worked. But the fact was, I didn't feel good about myself. Not really. Like I said, if you'd asked me then, I would have said, oh yeah, sure, I feel fine. But did I really love myself? Not all that much. And the reason is I didn't really appreciate myself. I didn't take the time to appreciate myself every single day. What am I doing right? One of my co-hosts gave me this one time and I really loved it. She said, if we treated our best friends the way we treat ourselves, we wouldn't have best friends because we're so cruel to ourselves. We're so rough on ourselves. We beat ourselves up continuously. I did this wrong. I can't believe I did that. What a stupid thing. I can't believe I said that. I hope they didn't hear that. I mean, it's just like this one long litany of just beating the crap out of ourselves. Imagine what happens if we turn that around and say, you know what? You did pretty damn good today, Walt. In fact, I'm pretty proud of you. That's an entirely different kind of dialogue. An entirely different kind of communication and one that, I mean, here's the test. You want to find out whether or not you're actually acclimated to it? Look into a mirror and say to yourself, I love you. See how you feel. Most people are going to have the reaction I had the first time I tried that exercise was, I love you. Oh God, I can't do this.
That's funny.
I'm serious. That's the way most of us actually deep down feel about ourselves. So I strongly urge you, consider this as a 4th add-on for your list there, because I love the list. I think this one really just accented in a huge, huge way.
You're like the Larry King of law of attraction.
Well, thank you very much. I like that. That is a great correlation right there. You're going to equate
You're like
me to
the
Larry
LOA
King.
King.
Yeah, I mean, Larry King was the king of talk shows. There is absolutely no doubt about that. So thank you for that. That's really great. Hey, before we let you go, though, we got to get some info from you. So you got to tell people, first of all, you actually have a course, a free course, I think you said, that people can take. How do they find out about the course? Let's do that first.
Absolutely, Walt Sam. Thanks so much for having me, by the way. This is super awesome. Really enjoy this conversation.
Oh, glad to have you.
I learned a lot, especially the point about the best friends. I have to copy paste and send that to my business friend. That was mind blowing. Love that. So good. So yeah, two ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel. Type Master Talk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas. And the second way is a free communication workshop that I deliver over Zoom. It's live. It's interactive. We do one every 3 weeks.
Nice.
And it's not a boring webinar. It's fun. So if you want to register for that, just join our next one at rockstarcommunicator.com.
And we'll make sure we'll include that address in the notes. And then for somebody who's already thought to themselves, this is a guy I need to talk to. This is a guy I need to kind of, get his help because I could use some help. How does that person reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so the best way to do that is actually to attend our free training.
Okay.
And because we usually like to work with people who take the time to really invest their time into this process. So once people do the free training at the end of that call, there's no pitch or anything, but for those of you who want to book a free call with us, we mentioned that like the last 5 minutes of that call.
All right. Very good. So, Sam, you're usually pretty quiet. I was able to draw you out a couple times, so that was good.
Okay. Yeah,
Most of the time, you do what you do right now, which is smile a lot. You're loving this. I know this. This is a good thing. But any last things for Brenden before we say goodbye for the day and thank him very much for what he's been doing?
No, I appreciate all of this. And I think a lot of what can be improved with communication can apply to just also personal growth as well. So they can go hand in hand. And I just like the perspectives you shared and everything. And it's given me a lot to think about. So I appreciate all of this.
Of course, Sam. I'm glad it was helpful, man.
Of course.
All right. So, Brenden, I'm going to see if I can do this again. I got it right the first time. We'll see if I can do it the second time. Brenden Kumarasamy, thank you very much for joining us on the show today. We really appreciate it. And boy, you've got some good stuff going. One thing I do want to say before you leave is there are many people that you've been able to touch so far in your life, and you will touch many more whom you will never see, you will never hear from, but you touch them and help them in ways that you're never even aware of. And we don't usually hear this, so that's why I like to say this. Thank you on their behalf. Thank you on behalf of the people that you've been able to help so far and that you will continue to help that you'll never know.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you, man. Really appreciate it.
And I appreciate you. And thank you very much for joining us on the show. And thank you very much to our podcast listeners, because I love you guys, especially those of you who've been with me for the full 10 years, or for those of you who've been for 5 years or 2 years or however long you've been listening. I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you so much. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.